Freddie Scappaticci, a hunter of spies within a secret army, skilled at interrogating so-called traitors.
They get you in the room, they blindfold you, they strip you, and they think they're going to go home, but they don't.
For over 2 decades, he was the chief spy catcher for the Irish Republican Army, the IRA. But there was a twist. He was also working for the IRA's so-called enemy, the British Army. When exposed, he denied his double life.
Don't take any more photos of this house, I'm telling you now.
This is the case of Freddie Scappaticci, one of the most controversial secret agents in British history. Whitmore Common, a protected nature reserve in the southeast of England. It's where an Irishman, who went by the name Frank, used to walk his dog every day. However, this stunning location masked an ugly truth. Frank was a murderer who was part of an IRA unit linked to the deaths of dozens of people. Until he died last year, I couldn't legally come here to trace his steps. A 2 decades old court order prohibited all journalists from tracking Frank down. This is who Frank really was: Freddie Scappaticci, a one-time IRA spy catcher and executioner. Back in Northern Ireland, the IRA's master interrogator extracted confessions from suspected spies. Those deemed guilty were shot dead under IRA orders.
There's not one killing that Freddie Scappaticci was involved in that the IRA did not sanction.
But Freddie Scappaticci was also secretly working for the British Army. His code name was Steak Knife.
Here we had this sauce, steak knife. It was the golden egg. We were terribly cagey about Fred.
The British Army's so-called golden egg ended up living here, Guildford, a town around 30 miles southwest of London. Freddie Scappaticci lived on the other side of this hedge. His neighbours only knew him by the name Frank. I'm told he was exceptionally private. He was visited by some members of his family and over the years had become noticeably frailer, but there was nothing unusual in his setup. For many years, no one had cause to suspect that the man living next door was a one-time IRA executioner in the pay of the public purse. The road that led Scappaticci to living out his final days in English suburbia alone was long and littered with bodies. Belfast, 2003. By then, the violence had largely receded in the wake of Northern Ireland's peace process. But Freddie Scappaticci's double life was beginning to unravel. And the man of many faces could not help but show his real character when press reports exposed his double life and journalists showed up outside his family home in West Belfast.
Yourselves off. Oh, fuck off. It's causing enough problems in this house. Take yourself off.
For almost 2 decades, the BBC was legally prohibited from broadcasting this footage.
And take no more photos of this house. Fucking sick of my family being tortured here over yous. Fucking scum yous are. Stories yous make up. Now, don't be holding your hand up and saying it's nothing to do with you. Don't take any more photos of this house, I'm telling you now. Because if you do, I'll come out and I'll fucking do you.
He didn't follow through on that threat, but Freddie Scappaticci had a history of violence. The grandson of Italian immigrants, 1964 marked his first recorded run-in with the law. The outbreak of violence in 1969 that went on to become known as the Troubles saw Scappaticci join the IRA. Parts of his life from then on can be told from mining the BBC's archive.
Steak knife.
In a mainly Republican area of Belfast, the markets, he developed a fearsome IRA reputation.
I had known Freddie Scappaticci from a pretty young age, 16. I was in the IRA and I found him very, not sinister, but I had a certain awe of him because I suppose I looked up to him. But I also know that he was a pretty ruthless character. By 1971, he was a local IRA commander in charge of the markets.
Scappaticci continued his rise to the senior ranks of the IRA in Belfast, in spite of setbacks, including his arrest in 1974.
I remember it quite well because I was in the prison canteen at the time in Crumlin Road Jail, and I come on the news that a man of Italian extraction had been arrested, and he was believed to be the officer in charge of the Belfast Brigade. I quickly worked out it was Freddie.
The violence continued to spill over on the streets, but there was another invisible front line of police, army and spooks. In the shadows, 3 agencies of the state were engaged in a secret intelligence war against the IRA.
The 3 main arms of intelligence collection, IUC Special Branch, Security Service, the Army, have quite different purposes and aims. The IUC Special Branch was essentially engaged in saving life or preventing murder, and then dealing with it as a police matter. The Security Service was out to identify potential threats and counter them through intelligence methods. The Army was there, in a sense, fighting a war with an enemy. It gets whatever intelligence it can any way it can as soon as it can get it. So you have these 3 cultures working with very different approaches.
The intelligence war was being driven by covert technical methods and, crucially, informers, whom the IRA labelled touts. According to the IRA's own code, the punishment for giving away its secrets was execution. Those at the top table of the IRA, its leaders like this man, Martin McGuinness, who later was at the top table of government, set up an IRA internal security unit.
When they were formed, it was a sort of split off in the intelligence department. I thought it was a bad idea. I said it to McGuinness, who was then chief of staff, but he said, well, we think it's a good idea. That ended that. When they were formed, they appointed people of huge long standing in the movement, you know, who'd been in the IRA since 1969, 1970, who had done jail time and that sort of thing, and who were therefore believed to be above suspicion. And of course, nobody's above suspicion. You know.
Freddie Scappaticci was put on the IRA's new security team.
Every volunteer coming in the IRA had to be vetted by the security department. And then when they were arrested, or if an operation went wrong, or if somebody on an operation cancelled that operation, then the security team would move in and start interrogating, asking questions.
Well, they were responsible basically for catching informers. In retrospect, it's very obvious. You know, the British would have been rubbing their hands in glee when the unit was formed and thinking, look, we've just got to get into these guys and find out their weaknesses, find out everything about them and turn a couple of them.
Exactly how Freddie Scappaticci was turned remains a mystery. But what is known is that by 1978, he was already working for the British Army under the codename Steak Knife.
Steak Knife would only talk to the army. And when I was commanding 39 Brigade, I didn't have people who Steak Knife necessarily knew at hand all the time. But we had a list of people whom, if Steak Knife indicated that he wanted to make contact, we could get someone over very quickly.
Freddie Scappaticci was the eyes and ears of the British Army at the heart of the IRA.
The battalions never knew about Steak Knife because it wasn't their business to do so. I mean, we didn't want to risk any compromise, because what he was producing was so high grade, not necessarily useful to people on the ground, but more to the politicians and the people in headquarters Northern Ireland.
His value was the high-level IRA information he had access to. These are British Army intelligence papers from 1978. The detail includes meetings about the IRA's ruling body, the Army Council, valuable for those wanting to know the IRA strategy, and crucially, a major IRA policy shift towards politics years before it actually played out. Freddie Scappaticci was not the only well-placed British Army agent within the IRA, but his position gave him unrivaled IRA access.
Freddie Scappaticci would have debriefed people after operations when they went wrong, supposedly trying to find out who may have compromised the operation. He was then able to know who was involved in all the operations. I mean, he would not have been consulted about or told about operations in advance, but he knew who the players were. And it was a simple matter of telling the British who to watch, telling his handlers who to watch. So the IRA was effectively compromised, because anything, this was a sort of the Clapham junction of the IRA. Everything had to go through it.
There was seemingly an obsession with informers within the IRA's security unit.
My first meeting with them was, aside from ordinary staff meetings or whatever, it was to alert them to the fact that they were under surveillance themselves. I produced transcripts, I produced the proof, and they still wouldn't accept it. For them, everything that went wrong was due to an informer.
Can you give me a sense of what kind of reputation they had within the IRA?
Well, personally, they had no particular reputation with me, except as a result of my experience as one of stupidity. But I think they were probably generally feared, and whether known or unknown to the leadership, and I suspect it was known, they engaged in torture and things that are supposed to be forbidden by the IRA.
The fate of those accused of giving away the IRA's secrets became a brutal form of public spectacle. Bodies of suspected informers were dumped in ditches, open ground, or street alleyways.
The body was discovered in a back alleyway at one end of Rodney Parade. The victim had head wounds. His hands had been tied behind his back and his shoes removed.
The bereaved were left with the stigma within their community that they'd buried a suspected tout.
Manny Wilson, as he was known, leaves a wife, Carol, and 4 children aged between 13 years and 9 months.
Some spoke out to protest their loved one's innocence.
He didn't do it, and I know he didn't. My brother was no informer. He knew nothing about the provisional IRA, for the same fellow wouldn't have walked the same side of the street as the provisional IRA. He didn't believe in their tactics or what they'd done.
The IRA paid no heed and continued on.
If somebody suspected of being an informer, you would be arrested by the IRA, taken to a safe house or somewhere south of the border, interrogated at length about your activities, to get you to break and confess.
South Armagh, along the border with the Republic of Ireland, it's where Scappaticci's IRA unit interrogated some suspected informers. This man, who was not prepared to show his face, was also a British spy inside the IRA and says he organised logistics ahead of interrogations.
My job would be to hire a van, and what would happen there is the suspect would be told, you're going to be in a training camp for 3-4 days. As soon as he's in the back of the van, Webley 45 was produced. He was basically with the IRA Internal Security Unit. You're under arrest. So basically, he'd be blindfolded, stripped of his clothes, turned around, the stuff would be kicked out. I would drive the van to the safe house, which was going to be used for the interrogation.
Suspected informers were interrogated at length. Freddie Scappaticci was once secretly recorded explaining his technique for extracting confessions.
The standard procedure is to strip them and debug them, right, just to see if they're wired up, and usually put a boiler suit on them, put them in a chair facing the wall, right, and then go from there. Everybody being what they are, everybody's a breaking point, you know?
Those who broke faced one outcome.
The minute you admit to anything, basically, in the IRA's army, the army orders in the Green Book is you're going to be executed.
As the 1980s ended, Scappaticci was moving in the IRA's senior circles while also being handled by a secretive unit within the British Army, the Force Research Unit, known as FRU. But the net was closing in. By the early 1990s, the former London Police Chief Sir John Stevens was investigating how the British Army ran agents.
FRU was an undercover team which actually worked under the direction of the GOC in Northern Ireland. They ran the informants on an intelligence basis. They were also handling an individual called Scappaticci on the IRA side.
Scappaticci was feeling the heat, so the Army's commander in Northern Ireland met him to calm his nerves. General John Wilsey later spoke about Scappaticci during a phone call recorded by someone posing as a journalist.
Fred Scappaticci, what happened? The head of the intelligence in Northern Ireland came to see me and said that Stevens was burrowing around and that Fred Scappaticci, whatever his name is, steak knife, was unsettled. And would I go and see him and reassure him to the value of his work? And that's what I did. He was our best agent.
Freddie Scappaticci was at the heart of an IRA unit involved in the deaths of dozens of suspected informers. But this man, who was also a secret British spy within the Republican movement, was safely extracted from Northern Ireland just hours before the IRA's security unit was due to interrogate him. Willie Carlin also claimed that he later found out the name of the agent who raised the alarm.
There's a guy called Steak Knife. I said, oh God, Steak Knife? Oh, what a name.
He claimed he later made inquiries about Steak Knife with a security contact.
I says, can I ask you something? Have you ever heard of Steak Knife? He says, why do you ask that? I says, because that's the person that saved my life. He leaned onto my face, literally, and he said to me, Wally, what do I tell you something? You leave that alone, that's going to go bad one day.
Agent Steak Knife has proven controversial. A big question is exactly how the army ran an agent they knew was involved in murder. The murder of people themselves accused to be state agents.
Whether there's a criminal culpability in terms of how they ran Scappaticci, whether Scappaticci went beyond the law, whether he was encouraged to do things which were criminal, illegal, murderous, those are the questions that have to be answered. It's the victims and, more importantly, the victims' relatives who want those questions answered, and they deserve to have them answered.
Those questions formed part of a major police investigation termed Operation Canova into the activities of the army agent known as Steak Knife. That report, 7 years in the making, at a cost of at least £40 million, criticised the IRA for unspeakable brutality towards alleged informers and their families. But it also criticised the state for allowing people to die in order to protect its secret agents.
During the Troubles, state agents were at the heart of a deadly battle between the security forces and the Provisional IRA. And the security forces repeatedly withheld and did not action information about threats to life, abductions and murders in order to protect agents from compromise. As a result, murders that could and should have been prevented were allowed to take place.
Operation Canova investigators also uncovered a stark equation. Freddie Scappaticci probably cost more lives than those he saved while being the Army's so-called golden egg inside the IRA.
While Steak Knife was undoubtedly a valuable asset who provided intelligence about the IRA at considerable risk to himself, claims that he was responsible for saving countless or hundreds of lives are hugely exaggerated. Steak Knife was himself involved in very serious and wholly unjustifiable criminality whilst operating as an agent, including murders.
In life, Freddie Scappaticci was hiding in plain sight. After he was exposed, he lied during a press conference when he denied that he was the agent Steak Knife.
Just my statement basically is that I am Freddie Scappaticci. I'm sitting here today with my solicitor. I'm telling you I'm not guilty of any of these allegations.
Freddie Scappaticci later fled Belfast. Here in England, living under his new identity, he was distant from his victims' families, accusers and collaborators. His death, announced in April 2023, meant that Agent Steak Knife was a spy who got away with murder. Those who know the secrets he took to his grave may yet choose to share them.